backs of middle-class people paying for tax cuts for billionaires.
President Trump, I'll give you 2 minutes.
First of all, I have no sales tax. That's an incorrect statement. She knows that. We're doing tariffs on other countries. Other countries are going to finally, after 75 years, pay us back for all that we've done for the world. And the tariff will be substantial in some cases. I took in billions and billions of dollars, as you know, from China. In fact, they never took the tariff off because it was so much money they can't. It would totally destroy everything that they've set out to do. They're taking in billions of dollars from China and other places. They've left the tariffs on. When I had it, I had tariffs, and yet I had no inflation. Look, we've had a terrible economy because inflation has, which is really known as a country buster. It breaks up countries. We have inflation like very few people have ever seen before, probably the worst in our nation's history. We were at 21%, but that's being generous because many things are 50, 60, 70, and 80% higher than they were just a few years ago. This has been a disaster for people, for the middle class, but for every class. On top of that, we have millions of people pouring into our country from prisons and jails, from mental institutions and insane asylums, and they're coming in and they're taking jobs that are occupied right now by African Americans and Hispanics.
She can't wait to respond. Typical woman, bro.
Can't wait to respond.
You mean black jobs?
Towns throughout the United States. You look at Springfield, Ohio. You look at Aurora in Colorado. They are taking over the towns. They're taking over buildings. They're going in violently. These are the people that she and Biden led into our country, and they're destroying our country. They're dangerous. They're at the highest level of criminality, and we have to get them out. We have to get them out fast. I created one of the greatest economies in the history of our country. I'll do it again and even better.
We are going to get to immigration and border security during this debate, but I would like to let Vice President Harris respond on the economy here.
Well, I would love to. Let's talk about what Donald Trump left us. Donald Trump left us the worst unemployment since the Great Depression. Donald Trump left us the worst public health epidemic in a century. Donald Trump left us.
That's a lie.
That wasn't his fault. The whole world was fucked up.
I know. Exactly. He got COVID is already there.
Clean up Donald Trump's mess. What we have done and what I intend to do is build on what we know are the aspirations and the hopes of the American people. But I'm going to tell you all in this debate tonight, you're going to hear from the same old tired playbook, a bunch of lies, grievances, and name-calling. What you're going to hear tonight is a detailed and dangerous plan called Project 2025 that the former president intends on implementing if he were elected again. I believe very strongly that the American people want a president who understands the importance of bringing us together, knowing we have so much more in common than what separates us. And I pledge to you to be a president for all Americans.
You did answer the question. That is not a response.
As you know, and as she knows better than anyone, I have nothing to do with Project 2025. That's out there. I haven't read it. I don't want to read it purposely. I'm not going to read it. This was a group of people that got together. They came up with some ideas, I guess some good, some bad, but it makes no difference. I have nothing to do. Everybody knows I'm an open book. Everybody knows what I'm going to do. Cut taxes very substantially and create a great economy like I did before. We had the greatest economy. We got hit with a pandemic, and the pandemic was not since 1917, where 100 million people died, has there been anything like it. We did a phenomenal job with the pandemic. We handed them over a country where the economy and where the stock market was higher than it was before the pandemic came in. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. We made ventilators for the entire world. We got gowns, we got masks, we did things that nobody thought possible. And people give me credit for rebuilding the military. They give me credit for a lot of things, but not enough credit for the great job we did with the pandemic. But the only jobs they got were bounce-back jobs. These were jobs bounced back, and it bounced back, and it went to their benefit. But I was the one that created them. They know it, and so does everybody else.
Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond.
So Donald Trump has no plan for you. And when you look at his economic plan, it's all about tax breaks for the richest people. I am offering what I describe as an opportunity economy, and the best economists in our country, if not the world, have reviewed our relative plans for the future of America. What Goldman Sachs has said is that Donald Trump's plan would make the economy worse. Mine would strengthen the economy. What the Wharton School has said is Donald Trump's plan would actually explode the deficit. 16
We have not seen her plan, bro. We've been waiting for her plan forever. We have not seen it.
She just put it up on her website like a few hours ago. It's a whole bunch of bullshit.
You have to look at where we
She's
are.
pretty much copying his plan if you look at it. It's almost the same thing.
Donald Trump actually has no plan for you because he is more interested in defending himself than he is in looking out for you.
That's just a soundbite. They gave her that to say. I went to the Wharton School of Finance. Many of those professors, the top professors, think my plan is a brilliant plan. It's a great plan. It's a plan that's going to bring up our worth, our value as a country. It's going to make people want to be able to go and work and create jobs and create a lot of good, solid money for our country. And just to finish off, she doesn't have a plan. She copied Biden's plan, and it's like four sentences. Like run, spot, run. 4 sentences that are just, oh, we'll try them.
Bro,
she doesn't have a
she like to laugh, you know, because you know who's laughing. She trying to hold it in.
Drill down on something you both brought up. The vice president brought up your tariffs. You responded, and let's drill down on this because your plan is what she calls is essentially a national sales tax. Your proposal calls for tariffs, as you pointed out here, on foreign imports across the board. You recently said that you might double your plan, imposing tariffs up to 20% on goods coming into this country. As you know, many economists say that with tariffs at that level, costs are then passed on to the consumer. Vice President Harris has argued it'll mean higher prices on gas, food, clothing, medication, arguing it costs the typical family nearly $4,000 a year. Do you believe Americans can afford higher prices because of tariffs?
They're not going to have higher prices. What's going to have and who's going to have higher prices is China and all of the countries that have been ripping us off for years. I was the only president ever. China was paying us hundreds of billions of dollars, and so were other countries. And, you know, if she doesn't like them, they should have gone out and they should have immediately cut the tariffs. But those tariffs are there 3.5 years now under their administration. We are going to take in billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars. I had no inflation, virtually no inflation. They had the highest inflation perhaps in the history of our country because I've never seen a worse period of time. People can't go out and buy cereal or bacon or eggs or anything else. The people of our country are absolutely dying with what they've done. They've destroyed the economy. And all you have to do is look at a poll. The polls say 80 and 85 and even 90% that the Trump economy was great, that their economy was terrible.
Vice President Harris, I do want to ask for your response. You heard what the president said there because the administration did keep a number of the Trump tariffs in place. So how do you respond?
Well, let's be clear that the Trump administration resulted in a trade deficit, one of the highest we've ever seen in the history of America. He invited trade wars. You want to talk about his deal with China? What he ended up doing is under Donald Trump's presidency, he ended up selling American chips to China to help them improve and modernize their military, basically sold us out, when a policy about China should be in making sure the United States of America wins the competition for the 21st century, which means focusing on the details of what that requires, focusing on relationships with our allies, focusing on investing in American-based technology so that we win the race on AI, on quantum computing, focusing on what we need to do to support America's workforce so that we don't end up having, on the short end of the stick, in terms of workers' rights. But what Donald Trump did, let's talk about this, with COVID, is he actually thanked President Xi for what he did during COVID. Look at his tweet. Thank you, President Xi, exclamation point, when we know that Xi was responsible for lacking and not giving us transparency about the origins of COVID.
President,
come on now,
First
dog.
of all, they bought their chips from Taiwan. We hardly make chips anymore because of
How do you want to say that?
like they have and policies like they have. I don't say her because she has no policy. Everything that she believed 3 years ago and 4 years ago is out the window. She's going to my philosophy now. In fact, I was going to send her a MAGA hat. She's gone to my philosophy, but if she ever got elected, she'd change it. And
He
it
wants
will
to
be
laugh.
the end of our country. She's a Marxist. Everybody knows she's a Marxist.
Like
Her
her
father's
daddy.
a Marxist professor in
True.
economics, and he taught her well. But when you look at what she's done to our country, and when you look at these millions and millions of people that are pouring into our
Let's watch
country,
her body language. Look at
we're
her
at,
body
I believe,
language.
21 million people, not the 15 that people say, and I think it's a lot higher than the 21. That's bigger than New York State pouring in. And just look at what they're doing to our country. They're criminals. Many of these people coming in are criminals. And that's bad for our economy, too. You know, you mentioned before, we'll talk about immigration later. Well, bad immigration is the worst thing that can happen to our economy. They have, and she has, destroyed our country with policy that's insane. Almost policy that you'd say they have to hate our country.
President Trump, thank you. Lindsay?
I want to turn to the issue of abortion. President Trump, you've often touted that you were able to kill Roe v. Wade. Last year, you said that you were proud to be the most pro-life president in American history. Then last month, you said that your administration would be great for women and their reproductive rights. In your home state of Florida, you surprised many with regard to your 6-week abortion ban because you initially had said that it was too short. And you said, quote, I'm going to be voting that we need more than 6 weeks. But then the very next day, you reversed course and said you would vote to support the 6-week ban. Vice President Harris says that women shouldn't trust you on the issue of abortion because you've changed your position so many times. Therefore, why should they trust you?
Well, the reason I'm doing that vote is because the plan is, as you know, the vote is, they have abortion in the 9th month. They even have, and you can look at the governor of West Virginia, the previous governor of West Virginia, not the current governor, who's doing an excellent job, but the governor before, he said the baby will be born and we will decide what to do with the baby. In other words, we'll execute the baby.
Ooh.
And that's why I did that, because that predominates, because they're radical. The Democrats are radical in that. And her vice presidential pick, which I think was a horrible pick, by the way, for our country, because he is really out of it. But her vice presidential pick says abortion in the 9th month is absolutely fine. He also says execution after birth. It's execution, no longer abortion, because the baby is born, is okay. And that's not okay with me. Hence the vote.
He's right about that because they caught Planned Parenthood having a conversation about even when they have the children in the 9th month, and what would they do with the organs? They pretty much sell it. They don't care.
Strength
Okay.
of 6 Supreme Court justices, we were able to do that. Now, I believe in the exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother. I believe strongly in it. Ronald Reagan did also. 85% of Republicans do. Exceptions. Very important. But we were able to get it, and now states are voting on it. And for the first time, you're going to see, look, this is an issue that's torn our country apart for 52 years. Every legal scholar, every Democrat, every Republican, liberal, conservative, they all wanted this issue to be brought back to the states where the people could vote. And that's what happened. Now,
That's democracy,
Ohio,
ain't it?
the vote was somewhat
Yep.
liberal. Kansas, the vote was somewhat liberal, much more liberal than people would have thought. But each individual state is voting. It's the vote of the people now. It's not tied up in the federal government. I did a great service in doing it. It took courage to do it. And the Supreme Court had great courage in doing it. And I give tremendous credit to those 6 justices.
There is no state in this country where it is legal to kill a baby after it's born. Madam Vice President, I want to get your response to President.
He just misspoke. What you talking about?
And that's
He
not actually
misspoke.
a surprising fact. Let's understand how we got here. Donald
Explain.
Trump hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the
Which was his
intention
right,
that they would undo the
Like
protections of
every
Roe v.
president.
And they did exactly as he intended. And now in over 20 states, there are Trump abortion bans, which make it criminal for a doctor or nurse to
Trump
provide health care.
abortion
In one
bans.
state, it provides prison for life. Trump abortion bans that make no exception even for rape and incest, which understand what that
That's
means.
true.
A survivor of a crime of violation to their body does not have the right to make a decision about what happens to their body next. That is immoral. And one does
She's
not have to
lying.
abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree. The government, and Donald Trump certainly, should not be telling a woman what to do with her body. I have talked with women
I hate when they
around
word it
our
like
country.
that, man.
You want to
Of
talk about this
course.
is what people wanted? Pregnant women who want to carry a pregnancy to term, suffering from a miscarriage, being denied care in an emergency room because the healthcare providers are afraid they might go to jail, and she's bleeding out in a car in the parking lot. She didn't want that. Her
No,
husband
the
didn't want
That's
percentage is
that.
not that
bullshit,
She was
bro.
a
high.
12
What
or
a false
13-year-old
equivalency.
survivor of incest.
Exactly. She's trying to make it feel like it's a
They
terrible
don't
thing.
want that. And I pledge to you, when Congress passes a bill to put back in place the protections of Roe v. Wade, as President of the United States, I will proudly sign it into law. But understand, if Donald Trump were to be reelected, he will sign a national abortion ban. Understand, in his Project 2025, there would be a national abortion, a monitor that would be
He
monitoring
just
your
said he ain't got
pregnancies,
nothing to
your
do with Project
miscarriages. I think the
2025.
American people believe that certain freedoms, in particular the freedom to make decisions about one's own body, should not be made by the government.
Thank you, Vice President Harris.
He was president back then. He didn't do it. So why you think he would do it now? He said he left it up to the states.
Because
Yeah.
we've gotten what everybody wanted. Democrats, Republicans, and everybody else, and every legal scholar wanted it to be brought back into the states. And the states are voting. And it may take a little time, but for 52 years, this issue has torn our country apart. And they've wanted it back in the states. And I did something that nobody thought was possible. The states are now voting. What she says is an absolute lie. And as far as the abortion ban, no, I'm not in favor of abortion ban, but it doesn't matter because this issue has now been taken over by the states.
Would you veto a national abortion ban if it came
Well, I
to your
won't
desk?
have to because, again, two things.
Be
Number
careful,
one,
Trump.
she said she'll go back to Congress. She'll never get the vote. It's impossible for her to get the vote, especially now with the 50-50, and essentially 50-50 in both Senate and the House. She's not going to get the vote. She can't get the vote. She won't even come close to it. So it's just talk. You know what it reminds me of?
You didn't get it when Obama was there.
Loans
Exactly.
terminated, and it ended up being a total catastrophe. The student loans, and then her, I think probably her boss, if you call him a boss, he spends all his time on the beach. But look, her boss went out and said, we'll do it again. We'll do it a different way. And he went out, got rejected again by the Supreme Court. So
He gonna get them sound bites in there.
taunted with this whole thing.
Okay.
This whole idea. And how unfair that would have been, part of the reason they lost, to the millions and millions of people that had to pay off their student loans. They didn't get it for free. But they were saying it's the same way that they talked about that they talk about abortion.
But if I could just get a yes or no, because your running mate, J.D. Vance, has said that you would veto it if it did come to your desk.
Well, I didn't discuss it with J.D. In all fairness, J.D., and I don't mind if he has a certain view, but I think he was speaking for me, but I really didn't. Look, we don't have to discuss it because she'd never be able to get it, just like she couldn't get student loans. They couldn't get student loans. They didn't even come close to getting student loans. They taunted young people and a lot of other people that had loans. They can never get this approved. So it doesn't matter what she says about going to Congress. So wonderful. Let's go to Congress, do it. But the fact is that for years they wanted to get it out of Congress and out of the federal government, and we did something that everybody said couldn't be done. And now you have a vote of the people on abortion.
They gonna eat him up for not saying he won't veto it though.
Would you support any
He
restrictions
avoided
on a
it.
woman's right to an abortion?
I absolutely support reinstating the protections of Roe v. Wade, and as you rightly mentioned, nowhere in America is a woman carrying a pregnancy to term and asking for an abortion. That is not happening. It's insulting to the women of America. And understand what has been happening under Donald Trump's abortion bans. Couples who pray and dream of having a family are being denied IVF treatments. What is happening in our
No, he said he's in favor of it.
working women who are working 1 or 2 jobs, who can barely afford childcare as it is, have to travel to another state to get on a plane sitting next to strangers to go and get the health care she needs, barely can afford to do it, and what you are putting her through is unconscionable. And the people of America have not, the majority of Americans believe in a woman's right to make decisions about her own body. And that is why in every state where this issue has been on the ballot, in red and blue states both, the people of America have voted for freedom.
Vice President Harris,
Excuse me, I
thank
have
you.
to respond. Another lie. It's another lie.
Yep,
I have
yep.
been a leader on IVF, which is fertilization.
Yep.
The IVF, I have been a leader. In fact, when they got a very negative decision on IVF from the Alabama courts, I saw the people of Alabama and the legislature 2 days later voted it in. I've been a leader on it. They know that, and everybody else knows it. I have been a leader on fertilization, IVF. And the other thing, you should ask, will she allow abortion in the 8th month, 9th month, 7th month?
Come on.
Okay, would you do that? Why don't you ask her that question?
Why don't you answer
That's
the
the problem.
question?
Then let the mic on.
Roe v.
Answer the
Wade,
question
you
with
could
your
This is a
either
cut of mic
allow
off.
abortions
I'm
in the
speaking,
7th
Miss Vice
month,
President.
The 8th month, the 9th month,
Not true.
and probably after birth. Just look at the former governor of Virginia. The governor of Virginia said, we put the baby aside, and then we determine what we want to do with the baby.
President Trump, thank you.
We're going to turn now to immigration and border security. We know it's an issue that's important to Republicans, Democrats, voters across the board in this country. Vice President Harris, you were tasked by President Biden with getting to the root causes of migration from Central America. We know that illegal
There we go.
migrations reached a record high in the Biden administration. This past June, President Biden imposed tough new asylum restrictions. We know the numbers since then have dropped significantly. But my question to you tonight is, why did the administration wait until 6 months before the election to act? And would you have done anything differently from President Biden on this?
So I'm the only person on this stage who has prosecuted transnational criminal organizations.
Oh, shit.
Same old talking point.
Shit.
You remember that, right?
And let me say that the United States Congress, including some of the most conservative members of the United States Senate, came up with a border security bill which I supported. And that bill would have put 1,500 more border agents on the border to help those folks who are working there right now overtime, trying to do their job. It would have allowed us to stem the flow of fentanyl coming into the United States. I know there are so many families watching tonight who have been personally affected by the surge of fentanyl in our country. That bill would have put more resources to allow us to prosecute transnational criminal organizations for trafficking in guns, drugs, and human beings. But you know what happened to that bill? Donald Trump got on the phone, called up some folks in Congress, and said, kill the bill. And you know why? Because he'd prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And understand, this comes at a time where the people of our country actually need a leader who engages in solutions, who actually addresses the problems at hand. But what we have in the former president is someone who would prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And I'll tell you something, he's going to talk about immigration a lot tonight, even when it's not the subject that is being raised. And I'm going to actually do something really unusual, and I'm going to invite you to attend one of Donald Trump's rallies, because it's a really interesting thing to watch. You will see
plenty of
during
it.
his rallies, he talks about fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter. He will talk about windmills cause cancer. And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom.
Oh, like yours?
And I will tell you, the one thing you will not hear him talk about is you. You will not hear him talk about your needs, your dreams, and your desires.
Bullshit.
And I'll tell you, I believe you
Yeah.
deserve a president.
The emotional
who
conversation.
first, and I pledge to you that
Let me
I
get
will.
to your
President
emotions.
Harris, thank you. President Trump, on that point, I want to get your response.
Well, I would like to respond.
Let me just ask, though, why did you try to kill that bill, and successfully so? That would have put thousands of additional agents and
Those are all the
officers on
stuff,
First, let me
all the
respond
other
to the
stuff in the
rallies.
bill.
She said people
Exactly.
people don't go to her rallies. There's no reason to go. And the people that do go, she's busing them in and paying them to be there, and then showing them in a different light. So she can't talk about that. People don't leave my rallies. We have the biggest rallies, the most incredible rallies in the history of politics. That's because people want to take their country back. Our country is being lost. We're a failing nation. And it happened 3.5 years ago. And what's going on here, you're going to end up in World War III, just to go into another subject. What they have done to our country by allowing these millions and millions of people to come into our country, and look at what's happening to the towns all over the United States. And a lot of towns don't want to talk. It's not going to be Aurora or Springfield. A lot of towns don't want to talk about it because they're so embarrassed by it. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country, and it's a shame. As far as rallies are concerned, as far as the reason they go is they like what I say. They want to bring our country back. They want to make America
She's trying to make him look crazy by looking at him like that.
Yeah, she's trying to.
She's destroying this
She's
country.
so condescending.
And if she becomes president,
Yep, that's what they said. We're gonna make him talk. Cut him mic.
not only success, will end up being Venezuela on steroids.
I just want to clarify here. You bring up Springfield, Ohio, and ABC News did reach out to the city manager there. He told us there have been no credible reports of specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the immigrant
Who's to
community.
decide what's a credible report? It's people saying
The
it.
people on television say my dog was taken and used for food. So maybe he said that, and maybe that's a good thing to say for a city manager.
I'm not taking this from
But the
television.
people are
I'm
on
taking it from
television
the city
saying that
manager.
Yeah, but why you fact checking him? Why you fact checking him? You're not fact checking her, man.
Exactly, because it's ABC.
Vice President
find
Harris,
out.
I'll let you respond.
Yep,
to
yep.
what you've heard.
You talk about extreme.
The laugh president.
One of the reasons why in this election, I actually have the endorsement of 200 Republicans who have formerly worked with President Bush, Mitt Romney, and John McCain, including the endorsement of former Vice President Dick Cheney and Congress member Liz Cheney. And if you want to really know the inside track on who the former president is, if he didn't make it clear already, just ask people who have worked with him. His former chief of staff, a 4-star general, has said he has contempt for the Constitution of the United States. His former national security advisor.
What is she talking about, bro? This is not the
His
question.
former Secretary of Defense has said the nation, the republic, would never survive another Trump term. And when we listen to this kind of rhetoric, when the issues that affect the American people are not being addressed, I think the choice is clear in this election.
President Trump, I'll give you a quick minute to respond
Yeah.
here.
Thank you, because when I hear that, see, I'm a different kind of a person. I fired most of those people, not so graciously. They did bad things or a bad job. I fired them. They never fired one person. They didn't fire anybody having to do with Afghanistan and the Taliban and the 13 people who's were just killed, viciously and violently killed. And I got to know the parents and the family. They didn't fire. They should have fired all those generals, all those top people, because that was one of the most incompetently handled situations anybody has ever seen. So when somebody does a bad job, I fire him. And you take a guy like Esper. He was no good. I fired him. So he writes a book. Another one writes a book. Because with me, they can write books. With nobody else can they. But they have done such a poor job, and they never fire anybody. Look at the economy. Look at the inflation. They didn't fire any of their economists. They have the same people. That's a good way not to have books written about you. But just to finish, I got more votes than any Republican in history by far. In fact, I got more votes than any president, sitting president, in history by far.
Let me continue on immigration. It was what you wanted to talk about earlier, so let's get back to your deportation proposal that the vice president has reacted to as well. President Trump, you call this the largest domestic deportation operation in the history of our country. You say you would use the National Guard. You say if things get out of control, you'd have no problem using the U.S. military.
Police, yes.
You also said you would use local police. How would you deport 11 million undocumented immigrants? I know you believe that number is much higher. Take us through this. What does this look like? Will authorities be going door to door in this country?
Yeah, it is much higher because of them. They allowed criminals, many, many millions of criminals. They allowed terrorists. They allowed common street criminals. They allowed people to come in, drug dealers, to come into our country. And they're now in the United States and told by their countries like Venezuela, don't ever come back or we're going to kill you. Do you know that crime in Venezuela and crime in countries all over the world is way down? You know why? Because they've taken their criminals off the street and they've given them to her to put into our country. And this will be one of the greatest mistakes in history for them to allow, and I think they probably did it because they think they're going to get votes, but it's not worth it because they're destroying the fabric of our country by what they've done. There's never been anything done like this at all. They've destroyed
trying
the
to pass a
fabric
law
of
to
our
let them
country.
vote.
Millions of people
Yep,
let
yep.
in, and all
And that's
over
a
the world,
fact.
crime is down all over the world except here.
Let's see if he
Crime
answers
is
that
up
question.
through the roof, despite their
he's not
fraudulent
answering the
statements that they
question.
made. Crime in this country is through the roof. And we have a new form of crime. It's called migrant crime. And it's happening at levels that nobody thought possible.
President Trump, as you know, the FBI says overall violent crime is actually coming down in this country. But Vice
Excuse
President
me.
Why is he fact checking him, bro? Like he don't fact check her. Like he's a liar. Like
They didn't include the cities with the worst crime. It was a fraud. Just like their number of 818,000 jobs that they said they created turned out to be a fraud.
President Trump, thank you. I'll let you respond, Vice President Harris.
Well, I think this is so rich, coming from someone who has been prosecuted
Oh, here we go. With this
For-
felon
there we
shit.
go.
national security crimes, economic crimes, election interference, has been found liable for sexual assault, and his next big court appearance is in November at his own criminal sentencing. And let's be clear.
Yeah, because y'all
where
prosecuting
each
y'all
person
political
stands
opponent.
on the issue of what is important about respect for the rule of law and respect for law enforcement. The former vice president called for defunding federal law enforcement, 45,000 agents, get this, on the day after he was arraigned on 34 felony counts. So let's talk about what is important in this race. It is important that we move forward, that we turn the page.
I think at one point she was advocating defund the police.
And address
Oh,
Why are we not
hardcore.
fact checking
the
her?
American people,
Hardcore.
address what we need to do about the housing shortage, which I have a plan for. Address what we must do to support our small businesses. Address bringing down the price of groceries. But frankly, the American people are exhausted.
She also wanted to abolish
with
ICE
the same old tired playbook.
President Harris, thank you.
Why he not fact checking her?
and
Every one of those
decriminalize
cases
illegal
was started by
immigration.
them against their political opponent. And I'm winning most of them, and I will win the rest on appeal. And you saw that with the decision that came down just recently from the Supreme Court. I'm winning most of them. But those are cases, it's called weaponization. Never happened in this country. They weaponized
Thank
the
you.
Justice Department. Every one of those cases was involved with the DOJ, from Atlanta and Fani Willis to the Attorney General of New York and the DA in New York. Every one of those cases.
All
and
Democrat
then
judges,
they
never
say,
Trumpers.
"Oh, he's a
Yep,
criminal."
yep.
They're the ones that made them go after me. By the way, Joe Biden was found essentially guilty on the documents case. And what happened in my documents case?
He's
They
too
said, "Well,
old,
that's the
right,
toughest
right.
of them all." A
Yeah.
complete and total victory. 2 months ago, it was thrown out. It's weaponization, and they used it, and it's never happened in this country.
Banana
They used
Republic.
it to try and win an election. They're
President Trump.
fake cases.
President Trump, thank you. A really quick response here, Vice President Harris, on this notion of weaponization of the Justice Department.
Well, let's talk about extreme and understand the context in which this election in 2024 is taking place. The United States Supreme Court recently ruled that the former president would essentially be immune from any misconduct if he were to enter the White House again. Understand,
That's
this
for
is
any
someone who has
president,
openly
and it's
said
always
he
been
would
like that.
terminate, I'm quoting,
Even
terminate
you
would have
the
immunity.
Constitution of the United States.
Exactly.
That he would weaponize the Department of Justice against his political enemies. Someone who has openly expressed disdain for members of
And
our
who was
government.
that? I want to
Understand
know.
what it would mean if Donald Trump were back in the White House with no guardrails, because certainly we know
He didn't
now
have
the
no
court won't
guardrails
stop
the
him.
first
We know
time.
J.D. Vance is not going to stop him. It's up to the American people.
Vice President
stop
Harris,
him.
thank you. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president,
Weaponized, please.
We got to
This is the
continue
one
here.
that weaponized, not me. She weaponized.
Yeah, y'all
I
already
probably
did
took
it.
A bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me. They talk about democracy. I'm a threat to democracy. They're the threat to democracy
President
with a fake
Trump.
Russia investigation
We do have a lot to
that
get-
went nowhere.
We have a lot to get to.
Exactly.
Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president, you said you wanted to ban fracking. Now you don't. You wanted mandatory government buyback programs for assault weapons. Now your campaign says you don't. You supported decriminalizing border crossings. Now you're taking a harder line. I know you say that your values have not changed. So then why have so many of your policy positions changed?
So my values have not changed, and I'm going to discuss every one of
You
these.
said that already. Same talking
Oh,
point.
she's stuttering
Let's
now.
talk about fracking because we're here in Pennsylvania. I made that very clear in 2020. I will not ban fracking. I have not banned fracking
But
as
you
Vice
said
President
you
of the United
would.
States. And in fact, I was the tie-breaking vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, which opened new leases for fracking. My position is that we have got to invest in diverse sources of energy so we reduce our reliance on foreign oil. We have had the largest increase in domestic oil production in history because of an approach that recognizes that we cannot over-rely on foreign oil. As it relates to my values, let me tell you, I grew up a middle-class kid raised by a hardworking mother who
And
worked and
father.
saved and was able to buy our first home when I was a teenager. The values I bring to the importance of home ownership, knowing not everybody got handed $400 million on a silver platter and then filed bankruptcy 6 times, is a value that I bring to my work to say we are going to work with the private sector and home builders to increase 3 million homes, increase by 3 million homes by the end of my first term. My work that is related to having a friend when I was in high school who was sexually assaulted by her stepfather.
Oh,
And my
Lord.
focus then
What
Bring out the
that
tiny,
anything?
bring out the tiny
is based on a
violin.
value that is deeply grounded in the importance of standing up for those who are most vulnerable.
Let's do the
My
question.
work that is about protecting Social Security and Medicare is based on long-standing work that I have done, protecting seniors from scams. My values have not changed. And what is important is that there is a president who actually brings values and a
She's not
perspective
answering the
that is
question.
about lifting people up
Absolutely.
and not being
Values.
down.
Let's see the time she said values. We'll review
The
the
true measure
video.
of the leader is the leader who actually understands the strength is not in beating people down, it's in lifting people up. I intend to be that president.
President Trump, your
Well,
response?
first of all, I wasn't given $400 million. I wish I was. My father was a Brooklyn builder, Brooklyn, Queens, and a great father, and I learned a lot from him. But I was given a fraction
Thank
of that,
you.
a tiny fraction, and I built it into many, many billions of dollars, many, many billions. And when people see it, they are even surprised. So we don't have to talk about that. Fracking, she's been against it for 12 years.
True.
Defund the police, she's been against that forever. She
Thank
gave
you.
all that stuff up very wrongly, very horribly, and everybody's laughing at it, okay? They're all laughing at it. She gave up at least 12 and probably 14 or 15 different policies. Like, she was big on defund the police. In Minnesota, she went out. Wait a
Yes,
minute,
you
I'm
were. It's
talking
video
now,
evidence of that.
if you don't mind, please.
Don't shake your head.
Does that sound familiar?
I was hoping he was gonna get it like that.
She went out in Minnesota and wanted to let criminals that killed people, that burned
We need
down
that Jamaican flow.
get out of jail. She did things that nobody would ever think of. Now she wants to do transgender operations on illegal aliens that are in prison. This is a radical
That's
left
true.
liberal that would do this.
That's
She wants to
true.
confiscate your guns, and she will never allow fracking in Pennsylvania. If she won the election, fracking in Pennsylvania will end on day one. Just to finish, one thing so important in my opinion. So I got the oil business going like nobody has ever done before. When they took over, they got rid of it, started getting rid of it, and the prices were going up the roof. They immediately let these guys go to where they were. I would have been 5 times, 4 times, 5 times higher, because you're talking about 3.5 years ago. They got it up to where I was because they had no choice, because the prices of energy were quadrupling and doubling. You saw what happened to gasoline. So they said, let's go back to Trump. But if she won the election, the day after that election, they'll go back to destroying our country, and oil will be dead, fossil fuel will be dead, we'll go back to windmills, and we'll go back to solar, where they need a whole desert to get some energy to come out of it. You ever see a solar plant? By the way, I'm a big fan of solar. But they take 400,
President Trump.
500 acres of desert
President
soil.
Trump, we have a
These
lot
are
of
not good
issues
things
that we
for the
have to get
environment,
to.
as
We're
she
out of time.
understands.
Thank you.
Lindsay, thank you. We have an election in just 56 days. And I want to talk about the peaceful transfer of power, which, of course, we all know is a cornerstone of our democracy and the role of a president in a moment of crisis. Mr. President, on January 6th, you told your supporters to march to the Capitol. You said you would be right there with them. The country
Why are we bringing that up, man?
Capitol that day, the
You knew they
officers
were.
coming under attack. Aides in the West Wing say you watched it unfold on television off the Oval Office. You did send out tweets, but it was more than 2 hours before you sent out that video message telling your supporters to go home. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day?
You just said a thing that isn't covered. Peacefully and patriotically, I said during my speech, not later on.
Thank you.
Peacefully and patriotically. And nobody on the other side was killed. Ashley Babbitt was shot by an out-of-control police officer that should have never, ever shot her. It's a disgrace. But we didn't do this group of people that have been treated so badly. I ask, what about all the people that are pouring into our country and killing people that she allowed to pour in? She was the border czar, remember that. She was the border czar. She doesn't want to be called the border czar because she's embarrassed by the border. In fact, she said at the beginning, oh, I'm surprised you're not talking about the border yet. That's because she knows what a bad job they've done. What about those people? When are they going to be prosecuted? When are these people from countries
What about all
over
the
world, not just
BLM
South
riots she
America?
supported?
They're coming in from
Burning down
all
cities and
over
shit.
the world, David. All over the world.
And one of
Crime rates are down
the
all over
biggest
world.
members
But let me
But
just
got
one of those
investigated
people-
for
one of
stealing
those
that
people are
money.
gonna be prosecuted. One
Right,
of the
the
people
90
that
million.
burned down Minneapolis going to
Yep,
be
yep.
prosecuted. Or in Seattle, they went into Seattle. They took over a big percentage of the city of Seattle. When are those people going to be prosecuted?
But let me just ask
You might ask her that question.
You were the president. You were watching it unfold on television. It's a very simple question as we move forward toward another election. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day? Yes or no?
I had nothing to do with that other than they asked me to make a speech. I showed up for a speech. I said, I think it's going to be big. I went to Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington, D.C., and the mayor put it back in writing, as you know. I said, you know,
She admitted
this
to
is
it.
gonna be a
Nancy
very
admitted to
big
it.
rally or whatever you want to call it. And again, it wasn't done by me. It was
we
done
need
by
the
others.
National
I
Guard.
said, I'd like to give you
Yep.
10,000 National Guard or soldiers. They rejected me. Nancy Pelosi rejected me. It was just 2 weeks ago. Her
She
daughter
admitted
has a
that.
tape of her saying she is fully responsible for what happened.
Yep.
They want to get rid of that tape. It would have never happened if Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington did their jobs. I wasn't responsible for security. Nancy Pelosi was responsible. She didn't do her job.
The question was about you as president, not about former Speaker Pelosi, but I do want Vice President Harris to respond.
Oh, God.
I was at the Capitol on January 6th. I was the vice president-elect. I was also an acting senator. I was there. And on that day, the President of the United States incited a violent mob to attack our nation's capital, to desecrate our nation's capital. On that day, 140 law enforcement officers were injured, and some died. And understand,
They killed themselves
former
after the
president
fact.
has been indicted and impeached for exactly that reason. But this is not an isolated situation. Let's remember Charlottesville, where there was a mob of people carrying torches, spewing anti-Semitic hate. And what did the president then at the time say? There were fine people on each side.
Oh, here we go with that.
Let's remember that when it came to the Proud Boys, a militia, the president said, the former president said, stand back and stand by. So for everyone watching who remembers what January 6th was,
And nothing happened,
I
bro.
say we don't have to
You
go
said
back.
it. Nothing happened.
Let's not go back. We're not going back. It's time to turn the page. And if that was a bridge too far for you, well, there is a place in our campaign for you to stand for country, to stand for our democracy, to stand for rule of law, and to end the chaos, and to end the approach that is about attacking the foundations of our democracy because you don't like the outcome. And be clear on that point. Donald Trump, the candidate, has said in this election there will be a bloodbath. If this and the outcome of this election is not to his
That's
liking,
not what he said. That's not what he said, bro.
let's not go back.
You take it.
Chart
You say part of what he said.
future and not go
I
back.
remember that speech.
Let me just follow up here.
It was a different term, and it was a term that related to energy because they have destroyed our energy business. That was where bloodbath was. Also, on Charlottesville,
Thank you.
that story has been, as you would say, debunked. Laura Ingraham, Sean Hannity, Jesse, all of these people, they covered it. If they go an extra sentence, they will see it was perfect. It was debunked in almost every newspaper, but they still bring it up, just like they bring 2025 up. They bring all of this stuff up. I ask you this. You talk about the Capitol. Why are we allowing these millions of people to come through on the southern border? How come she's not doing anything? And I'll tell you what I would do, and I would be very proud to do it. I would say we would both leave this debate right now. I'd like to see her go down to Washington, D.C. during this debate because we're wasting a lot of time. Go down to, because she's been so bad, it's so ridiculous. Go down to Washington, D.C. and let her sign a bill to close up the border because they have the right to do it. They don't need bills. They have the right to do it. The President of the United States, you'll get him out of bed, you'll wake him up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and say, come on down to the office, let's sign a bill. If he signs a bill that the border is closed, all he has to do is say it to the Border Patrol, who are phenomenal. If they do that, the border is closed.
Mr.
Those
President,
people are killing many people, unlike J6.
We talked immigration here tonight. I do want to focus on this next issue to both of you because it really brings us this into focus, truth in these times that we're living in. Mr. President, for 3.5 years after you lost the 2020 election, you repeatedly falsely claimed that you won, many times saying you won in a landslide. In the past couple of weeks leading up to this debate, you have said, quote, you lost by a whisker, that you, quote, didn't quite make it, that you came up a little bit short.
I said that?
Are you now acknowledging that you lost in 2020?
No, I don't acknowledge that at all.
But
I
you
said
did
that
say
sarcastically.
But
You know
those-
that. It was said, oh, we lost by a whisker. That was said sarcastically. Look, there's so much proof. All you have to do is look at it. And they should have sent it back to the legislatures for approval. I got almost 75 million votes, the most votes any sitting president has ever gotten. I was told if I got 63, which was what I got in 2016, you can't be beaten. The election, people should never be thinking about an election as fraudulent. We need two things. We need walls, and we have to have it. We have to have borders, and we have to have good elections. Our elections are bad. And a lot of these illegal immigrants coming in, they're trying to get them to vote. They can't even speak English. They don't even know what country they're in practically. And these people are trying to get them to vote. And that's why they're allowing them to come into our country.
I did watch all of these pieces of video. I didn't detect the sarcasm, lost by a whisker, we didn't quite make it. And we should just point out here as clarification, and you know this, you and your allies, 60 cases in front of many judges, many of them
No
Republican.
judge looked at it.
And said
They
there was
said
no
we didn't have
widespread fraud.
standing. That's the other thing. They said we didn't have standing, a technicality. Can you imagine a system where a person in an election doesn't have standing? The president of the United States doesn't have standing. That's how we lost. If you look at the facts, and I'd love to have you'll do a special on it. I'll show you Georgia, and I'll show you Wisconsin, and I'll show you Pennsylvania, and I'll show you. We have so many facts and statistics, but you know what? That doesn't matter because we have to solve the problem that we have right now. That's old news. And the problem that we have right now is we have a nation in decline, and they have put it into decline. We have a nation that is dying, David.
Mr. President, thank you. Vice President Harris, you heard the president there tonight. He said he didn't say that he lost by a whisker. So he still believes he did not lose the election that was won by President Biden and yourself. But I do want to ask you about something that's come up in the last couple of days. This was a post from President Trump about this upcoming election just weeks away. He said, when I win, those people who cheated, and then he lists donors, voters, election officials, he says will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, which will include long-term prison sentences. One of your campaign's top lawyers responded saying, we won't let Donald Trump intimidate us. We won't let him suppress the vote. Is that what you believe he's trying to do here?
Donald Trump was fired by 81 million people. So let's be clear about that. And clearly he is having a very difficult time processing that. But we cannot afford to have a president of the United States who attempts, as he did in the past, to upend the will of the voters in a free and fair election. And I'm going to tell you that
Check like a
I
Democrat
have
has
traveled the
never
world as Vice President of
questioned
the United
an
States.
election before.
And
Even
will
Hillary
make
Exactly.
Clinton was like her election was stolen.
I have talked with military
Exactly.
leaders, some of whom worked with you, and they say you're a disgrace. And when
'Cause
you
they got
then
fired.
talk in this way in a presidential debate and deny what over and over again are court cases you have lost because you did in fact lose that election, it leads one to believe that perhaps we do not have in the candidate to my right the temperament or the ability to not be confused about fact. That's deeply troubling, and the American people
Come on
deserve
now, dawg.
better.
I'll give you 1 minute to respond.
Let me just say this. Viktor Orban, one of the most respected men, they call him a strong man. He's a tough person, smart. Prime Minister of Hungary. They said, why is the whole world blowing up? 3 years ago it wasn't. Why is it blowing up? He said, because you need Trump back as president. They were afraid of him. China was afraid, and I don't like to use the word afraid, but I'm just quoting him. China was afraid of him. North Korea was afraid of him. Look at what's going on with North Korea, by the way. He said Russia was afraid of him. I ended the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, and Biden put it back on day one, but he ended the XL pipeline. The XL pipeline in our country, he ended that. But he let the Russians build a pipeline going all over Europe and heading into Germany, the biggest pipeline in the world. Look, Viktor Orban said it. He said the most respected, most feared person is Donald Trump. We had no problems when Trump was president, but when this weak, pathetic man that you saw at a debate just a few months ago, that if he ran in that debate, he'd be running instead of her. She got no votes. He got 14 million votes. What you did, you talk about a threat to democracy. He got 14 million votes, and they threw him out of office. And you know what? I'll give you a little secret. He hates her. He can't stand her.
He hates her.
They threw him out. She got 0 votes. And when she ran, she was the first one to leave because she failed. And now she's running. I don't understand it, but
Mr.
I'm
President,
okay with it
Mr.
because
President, your time is
I think
up.
we're
Thank
going to
you.
do very well.
We've got a lot more.
Turning now to the Israel-Hamas war and the hostages who are still being held, Americans among them. Vice President Harris, in December, you said, quote, Israel has a right to defend itself, but you added, quote, it matters how, saying international humanitarian law must be respected. Israel must do more to protect innocent civilians. You said that 9 months ago. Now an estimated 40,000 Palestinians are dead, nearly 100 hostages remain. Just last week, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said there's not a deal in the making. President Biden has not been able to break through the stalemate. How would you do it?
Oh, what you gonna say? What
Let's
you gonna
understand how
say?
we got here. On October 7th, Hamas, a terrorist organization, slaughtered 1,200 Israelis. Many of them young people who were simply attending a concert. Women were horribly raped. And so absolutely, I said then, I say now, Israel has a right to defend itself. We will.
Man, there's just so much emphasis on women as like every time, like
It is
bro.
also true.
Let's
Far
say
too
people, 1,200 people, bro. That's it. Leave it at that. Why you separate women from everybody else?
What we know is that this war must end. It must end immediately, and the way it will end is we need a ceasefire deal and we need the hostages out. And so we will continue to work
you gonna do
around the
that?
clock on that. Work around the clock, also understanding that
How?
we must chart a course for
Bro,
a
you're the
two-state
VP right
solution.
now.
And
You're the
in
VP
that
right now. Let's
solution,
go.
there must be security for the Israeli people and Israel, and in equal measure for the Palestinians. But the one thing I will assure you always, I will always give Israel the ability to defend itself, in particular as it relates to Iran and any threat that Iran and its proxies pose to Israel. But we must have a two-state solution where we can rebuild Gaza, where the Palestinians have security, self-determination, and the dignity they so rightly deserve.
President Trump, how would you negotiate with Netanyahu and also Hamas in order to get the hostages out and prevent the killing of more innocent civilians in Gaza?
If I were president, it would have never started. If I were president, Russia would have never ever, I know Putin very well, he would have never, and there was no threat of it either, by the way, for 4 years, have gone into Ukraine and killed millions of people when you add it up, far worse than people understand what's going on over there. But when she mentions about Israel, all of a sudden, she hates Israel. She wouldn't even meet with Netanyahu when he went to Congress to make a very important speech. She refused to be there. She was at a sorority party of hers. She wanted to go to the sorority party. She hates Israel. If she's president, I believe that Israel will not exist within 2 years from now. And I've been pretty good at predictions, and I hope I'm wrong about that one. She hates Israel. At the same time, in her own way, she hates the Arab population because the whole place is going to get blown up. Arabs, Jewish people, Israel will be gone. It would have never happened. Iran was broke under Donald Trump. Now Iran has $300 billion because they took off all the sanctions that I had. Iran had no money for Hamas or Hezbollah.
Oh, why you shaking your head like it's not true? Why you shaking your head? It is true.
And they are spheres.
Why you shaking your head now?
Horrible terror. They had no money. It was a big story, and you know it. You covered it very well, actually. They had no money for terror. They were broke. Now they're a rich nation, and now what they're doing is they're spreading that money around. Look at what's happening with the Houthis and Yemen. Look at what's going on in the Middle East. This would have never happened. I will get that settled and fast, and I'll get the war with Ukraine and Russia ended. If I'm president-elect, I'll get it done before even becoming president.
Ooh, that's a bold statement right there, though.
Yeah.
That's absolutely not true. I have my entire career and life supported Israel and the Israeli people. He knows that. He's trying to, again, divide and distract from the reality.
She looks so tiny
which
when
is,
they show it like
very
that.
well known that
Yeah, I know,
Donald
right?
Trump is weak and wrong on national
She is
security
really small.
and foreign policy. It is well known
And
that
she's
he
not that
hires
tall either, because he's way
dictators,
taller.
wants to be a
I think they
dictator
got her
from day
on
one, according to himself.
like
It is
a
well known
stepper or something.
that he said of Putin that he can do whatever the hell he wants and go into Ukraine. It is well known that he said when Russia went into Ukraine, it was brilliant. It is well known he exchanged love letters with Kim Jong-un. And it is absolutely well known that these dictators and autocrats are rooting for you to be president again because they're so clear they can manipulate you with flattery and favors. And that is why so many military leaders who you have worked with have told me you are a disgrace. That is why we understand that we have to have a president who is not consistently weak and wrong on
Vice
national
President
security,
Harris.
including the importance of upholding and respecting in highest regard our military.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
They're the ones, and she's the one that caused it, that's weak on national security by allowing every nation last month for the year, 168 different countries sending people into our country. Their crime rates are way down. Putin endorsed her last week, said, I hope she wins. I think he meant it.
I saw
What
that
he's gotten
video.
away with is absolutely incredible. It wouldn't have happened with me. The leaders of other countries think that they're weak and incompetent, and they are. They're grossly incompetent. And I just ask one question. Why does Biden go in and kill the Keystone Pipeline and approve the single biggest deal that Russia's ever made, Nord Stream 2, the biggest pipeline anywhere in the world going to Germany and all over Europe? Because they're weak and they're ineffective. And Biden, by the way,
President
gets paid
Trump,
a lot of money.
Thank you. We have a lot of issues to get
That's
to.
not 2 minutes.
With much more.
That's not
This
2
is the
minutes.
ABC News
Right.
presidential debate from the National Constitution Center right here in Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
Are they taking a break or?
Yeah, they're taking a break.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Presidential
Bruh.
She's trying to feed off people's emotions, bro. Like, oh, we're gonna unite, bro. We want to know your policy plan. You're the vice president. Why you ain't doing nothing right now? You have the ability to like, hey, we doing this right now. And all of a sudden, you run for president, and I'm gonna do this on day one. Man, get out of here, man. Get out of here, man. That's
Changed so
irresponsible, man.
many of her policies, man. verbatim said that she would ban fracking. She said she would abolish ICE. She said illegal immigration shouldn't be illegal. She was they try to act like she wasn't the border czar, but she was like, it's video evidence of Biden saying this woman is in charge of the border, but she ain't. I think she still hasn't been to the border. You know what I'm saying? She was against the border wall, but now she got campaign ads showing sections of the border wall that Trump built, saying that she gonna build more. When everybody, her included, was calling it xenophobic and a waste of time to build a wall. She taking all his policies and trying to flip it like they hers. Even the fucking tax on the no tax on tips thing. Like,
Right.
It's crazy, man.
No, you know how they try to make her look as tall as she is. She's not that tall, bro. If you see her standing next to her husband, Trump is way taller than him, bro. Why are you trying to make it seem like you're toe to toe with that man? No, I want to hear you start laughing at everything he says, man, because all you do is laugh. You know what I'm saying?
They
Enough
told
of
her.
that, man.
I'm pretty sure they told her in the prep, hey, keep the laughing to a minimum, man, because that's how she be doing. But I did see somebody posted a video earlier about, because they made her podium like smaller and more proportional to her body to try to make her look the same size as Trump. Yeah,
it's crazy, bro. That's crazy, bro. That is crazy. Now, all that stuff that she's talking about, stop separating women from people in population like they have their own agenda. We all mixed in it, male and female. Nobody's trying to control a woman's body. Trump is not going after him saying, bro, you have all these different options in birth control. You got Plan B pill that now they sell everywhere. You like candy. What's your excuse, man? You guys are bringing up vans and trucks where people can have abortions right on the spot. It ain't those mothers that's suffering from unplanned pregnancy. It's not those mothers or daughters that got raped every day. These women are not just going out there getting raped every day, having unplanned pregnancy. No, they had to change their heart. If they have a disagreement with the man or whatever, they feel that they don't want to raise that child alone, or maybe they can't afford to raise that child alone. That's what they're doing. So if that's the case, then why are you talking about having women go to doctors and help them get pregnant if you helping women get rid of the baby in the first place? It's like, what is the purpose of that? You're wasting money, bro. You're wasting our time. Like, we ain't thinking and say, okay, if you want women to have kids, okay, have kids. You got women nowadays talking about, I'm better off having a child by myself without a man. What are you talking about, bro?
The thing
What are you
about
talking about?
the thing about the whole abortion thing, like the rate of everybody having babies in America is so low. Like, it's like we're not even replacing, like, that's why they have to let in so many immigrants. They'll never say it, but the birth rate is so low because of abortion, because so many babies are being terminated, that it's like the nation isn't even like sustainable anymore. It won't even be enough kids to pay into like Social Security and like for older people to be able to like retire and stuff. And that's why they have to let in so many illegal immigrants. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And they try to use like Democrats use like word semantics. They spin words. So they call it, instead of calling it abortion, instead of calling it like terminating the baby, they call it like reproductive rights because it sounds better. You know what I'm saying? And they try to say like, oh, you can't control a woman's body, but that's not like you can word it like that to make it sound better, but like that's the only instance where a woman's body is like controlled, and that's because it's another human body inside your body that is helpless and has no say in that whole process. But they starting again, so let's.
You have said you would solve this war in 24 hours. You said so just before the break tonight. How exactly would you do that? And I want to ask you a very simple question tonight. Do you want Ukraine to win this war?
I want the war to stop. I want to save lives. that are being uselessly, people being killed by the millions. It's the millions. It's so much worse than the numbers that you're getting, which are fake numbers. Look, we're in for 250 billion or more because they don't ask Europe, which is a much bigger beneficiary to getting this thing done than we are. They're in for $150 billion less because Biden and you don't have the courage to ask Europe like I did with NATO. They paid billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars when I said, either you pay up or we're not going to protect you anymore. So that's maybe one of the reasons they don't like me as much as they like weak people. But take a look at what's happening. We're in for 250 to 270.
You want to laugh.
100 to 150. They should be forced
There it
to
is.
equalize. With that being said, I want to get the war settled. I know Zelensky very well, and I know Putin very well. I have a good relationship, and they respect your president, okay? They respect me. They don't respect Biden. How would you respect him? Why? For what reason? He hasn't even made a phone call in 2 years to Putin, hasn't spoken to anybody. They don't even try and get it. That is a war that's dying to be settled. I will get it settled before I even become president. If I win, when I'm president-elect, and what I'll do is I'll speak to one, I'll speak to the other, I'll get them together. That war would have never happened. And in fact, when I saw Putin after I left, unfortunately left because our country has gone to hell. But after I left, when I saw him building up soldiers, he did it after I left, I said, oh, he must be negotiating. It must be a good, strong point of negotiation. Well, it wasn't, because Biden had no idea how to talk to him. He had no idea how to stop it. And now you have millions of people dead, and it's only getting worse, and it could lead to World War III. Don't kid yourself, David. We're playing with World War III, and we have a president that we don't even know if he's... Where is our president? We don't even know.
Facts. Where the fuck is Biden?
We don't even know. Is he our president? But we have a president,
Mr. President,
that doesn't know he's alive.
Your time is up. Final question. Do you believe it's in the U.S. best interest to end this war, yes or no?
I think it's the U.S. best interest to get this war finished and just get it done.
All right.
Negotiate a deal, because we have to stop all of these human lives from being destroyed.
I want to take this to Vice President Harris. I want to get your thoughts on support for Ukraine in this moment, but also, as Commander-in-Chief, if elected, how would you deal with Vladimir Putin, and would it be any different from what we're seeing from President Biden?
Well, first of all, it's important to remind the former president you're not running against Joe Biden, you're running against me.
Can't tell.
I believe the reason that Donald Trump says that this war would be over within 24 hours is because he would just give it up. And that's not who we are as Americans. Let's understand what happened here. I actually met with Zelensky a few days before Russia invaded, tried through force to change territorial boundaries, to defy one of the most important international rules and norms, which is the importance of sovereignty and territorial integrity. And I met with President Zelensky. I shared with him American intelligence about how he could defend himself. Days later, I went to NATO's eastern flank, to Poland and Romania. And through the work that I and others did, we brought 50 countries together to support Ukraine in its righteous defense.
But wasn't the deal
And
that they
because
shouldn't
of
try
our
to
support,
make
because of
Ukraine
the
join NATO?
air defense, the
NATO
ammunition,
wasn't
the
supposed to
artillery,
expand any
the
further
javelins, the
in the
Abrams
direction
tanks
of
that
Russia,
we
or
provided.
Russia would
Ukraine
take
stands
Ukraine
as an
back.
independent and free
That is
country.
correct.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now. And understand what that would mean, because Putin's agenda is not just about Ukraine. Understand why the European allies and our NATO allies are so thankful that you are no longer president, and that we understand the importance of the greatest military alliance the world has ever known, which is NATO, and what we have done to preserve the ability of Zelensky and the Ukrainians to fight for their independence. Otherwise, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv with his eyes on the rest of Europe, starting with Poland. And why don't you tell the 800,000
Putin ain't got
Polish
no
Americans
interest in
right
taking
here in
over all of
Pennsylvania
Europe?
how quickly you would give up for the sake of favor and what you think is a friendship with what is known to be a dictator who would eat you for lunch.
Yeah, right. He
Vice
didn't when
President
he was
Harris, thank you. We've
president.
heard from both of you on Ukraine tonight. Afghanistan came up in the last hour.
Putin said he was only trying to protect the other Russians in these small countries because they was pretty much being rooted out by the Ukrainians. That's what he said. If NATO moves any closer, I'm going to respond. When you start talking about putting Ukraine in NATO, you had a
in
problem.
Moscow, much happier than he is right now. But eventually, you know, he's got a thing that other people don't have. He's got nuclear weapons. They don't ever talk about that. He's got nuclear weapons. Nobody ever thinks about that. And eventually, maybe he'll use them, and maybe he hasn't been that threatening, but he does have that. Something we don't even like to talk about. Nobody likes to talk about it. But just so you understand, they sent her to negotiate peace before this war started. 3 days later, he went in and he started the war because everything they said was weak and stupid. They said the wrong things. That war should have never started. She was the emissary. They sent her in to negotiate with Zelensky and Putin, and she did. And the war started 3 days later. And that's the kind of talent we have with her.
Yeah.
She's worse than Biden. In my opinion, I think he's the worst president in the history of our country. She goes down as the worst vice president in the history of our country. But let me
Worst
tell you
approval
something.
rating ever.
She is a horrible
Yep.
negotiator. They sent her in to
She's hurt.
negotiate.
Look at her
As
eyes.
soon as they left,
She knows
Putin
it's true.
did the invasion.
President Trump, thank you. You did bring up something. You said she went to negotiate with Vladimir Putin. Vice President Harris, have you ever met Vladimir Putin? Can you clarify tonight?
Yet again, I said it at the beginning of this debate.
He never said he met.
This fella. And that is another.
That's not what he said.
When I went to meet with President Zelensky, I've now met with him over 5 times. The reality is it has been about
Answer the
standing as
question.
America always should, as a leader upholding international rules and norms, as a leader who shows strength, understanding that the alliances we have around the world are dependent on our ability to look out for our friends and not favor our enemies because you adore strong men instead of caring about democracy.
Yeah, she's so
and
tiny.
that is very much what is at stake here. The President of the United States is Commander-in-Chief. And the American people have a right to rely on a president who understands the significance of America's role and responsibility in terms of ensuring that there is stability and ensuring we stand up for our principles and not sell them for the benefit of personal flattery.
We've talked about Ukraine and Vladimir Putin. I do want to talk about Afghanistan.
Thank you.
It came up in the first hour of this
Yeah,
debate.
let's talk about
I
Afghanistan.
want to move on to Afghanistan.
Stoltenberg said Trump did the most amazing thing I've ever seen. He got these countries, the 28 countries at the time, to pay up. He said, I've never seen, he's the head of NATO. He said, I've never seen. For years, we were paying almost all of NATO. We were being ripped off by European nations, both on trade and on NATO.
True.
I got them
Especially
to pay
Germany.
up by saying, one of the
1%.
statements you made before, if you don't pay, we're not going to protect you.
President
Otherwise,
Trump.
we would have never gotten it. He said it was one of the most incredible jobs that he's ever seen done.
Thank you. I want to turn to Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of the debate, and we witnessed a poignant moment today on Capitol Hill, honoring the soldiers who died in the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan. I do want to ask the Vice President, do you believe any responsibility in the way that withdrawal played out?
Well, I will tell you, I agreed with President Biden's decision to pull out of Afghanistan. 4 presidents said they would, and Joe Biden did. And as a result, America's taxpayers are not paying the $300 million a day we were paying for that endless war. And as of today, there is not one member of the United States military who is in active duty in a combat zone in any war zone around the world, the first time this century. But let's understand how we got to where we are. Donald Trump, when he was president,
Is that true?
negotiated one of the weakest deals you can imagine. He calls himself a deal maker. Even his national security advisor said it was a weak, terrible deal. And here's how it went down. He bypassed the Afghan government. He negotiated directly with a terrorist organization called the Taliban. The negotiation involved the Taliban getting 5,000 Taliban terrorists released. And get this, and the president at the time invited the Taliban to Camp David, a place of storied significance for us as Americans, a place where we honor the importance of American diplomacy, where we invite
That's not the
and
first time they've been to the United States. Taliban been there before.
and
You have bin Laden there too, so what you talking about, man?
True
former
that. Hanging out with
president, as
Obama.
president, invited them
Hanging out with Bush.
to Camp David because he does not again appreciate the role and responsibility of the President of the United States to be commander-in-chief with a level of respect. And this gets back to the point of how he has consistently disparaged and demeaned members of our military, fallen soldiers, and the work that we must do to uphold the strength and the respect of the United States of America around the world.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, your response to her saying that you began the negotiations with the Taliban.
So if you take a look at that period of time, the Taliban was killing our soldiers, a lot of them, with snipers. And I got involved with the Taliban because the Taliban was doing the killing. That's the fighting force within Afghanistan. They don't bother doing that because, you know, they deal with the wrong people all the time. But I got involved. And Abdul is the head of the Taliban. He is still the head of the Taliban. And I told Abdul, don't do it anymore. You do it anymore, you're going to have problems. And he said, why do you send me a picture of my house? I said, you're going to have to figure that out, Abdul. And for 18
That's
months,
true.
we had nobody killed. We did have an agreement negotiated by Mike Pompeo. It was a very good agreement. The reason it was good, it was we were getting out. We would have been out faster than them, but we wouldn't have lost the soldiers. We wouldn't have left many Americans behind, and we wouldn't have left $85 million worth of brand new, beautiful military equipment behind. And just to finish, they blew it.
Don't shake
The
your
agreement
head.
said you have to do this, and they didn't do it. They didn't do it. The agreement was terminated by us because they didn't do what they were supposed to do.
I want to move on.
And these people did the worst withdrawal, and in my opinion, the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country. And by the way, that's why Russia attacked Ukraine, because they saw how incompetent she and her boss are.
President Trump, thank you. I want to move on now to race and politics in this country. Mr. President, you recently said of Vice President Harris, quote, I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she had
Here we go.
was black. I want to ask a bigger picture question here tonight. Why do you believe it's appropriate to weigh in on the racial identity of your opponent?
I don't, and I don't care. I don't care what she is.
Thank you. They asked the man a question, bro.
I couldn't
They asked the man a question,
Whatever she
and
wants
he
to be is
answered
okay
it.
with me.
But those were your words.
Whatever
I
she
don't know.
wants
I
to
don't
be
know. I
is
mean, all I
okay.
can say is I read where she was not black, that she put out, and I'll say that. And then I read that she was black, and that's okay. Either one was okay with me. That's up to her. That's up to her.
Vice President Harris, your thoughts on this?
She
Condescending.
ran as an
I think
Indian
it's-
woman
I mean,
through the
honestly, I think
Senate
it's
and
a tragedy that we have someone who wants to be president who has consistently, over the course of his career, attempted to use race to divide the American people. You know, I do believe that the vast
That's what
majority
y'all
of
do
us know
every
that we have
day.
so much more in common than what separates us, and we don't want
I was going to say,
constantly trying to divide us, and especially by race. And let's remember how Donald Trump started. He was land, he owned buildings, and he was investigated because he refused to rent property to black families. Let's remember, this is the same individual
that's the whole
who
story.
took out a full-page ad in the New York Times calling for the execution of 5 young black and Latino
And he never
boys who were
mentioned their
innocent,
race.
The Central Park 5.
Never said
Nope.
anything about their race.
Took
People
out
are
a
allowed to
full-page
think
ad
somebody's guilty.
calling for their execution. This is the same individual who spread birther lies about the first black president of the United States.
First
And I
mixed
think the American
president.
people want better than that, want better than this, want someone who understands, as I do, I travel our country. We see in each other a friend. We see in each other a neighbor. We don't want a leader who is constantly trying to have Americans point their fingers at each other.
Yeah,
I meet with people all the time who tell me, Can we please just have discourse about how we're going to invest in the aspirations
It's always race with the Democrats. Always race with the
knowing that
Democrats.
regardless of people's color or the language their grandmother speaks, we all have the same dreams and aspirations and want a president who invests in those, not in hate and division.
Vice President Harris, thank you. Lindsay?
Joe Biden, if you don't vote for me, you ain't black.
They forgot that. They forgot that one, ain't it? I think he got donkey of the day for that one.
Destroying our
Exactly.
country. And they come up with things like what she just said. Going back many, many years, when a lot of people, including Mayor Bloomberg, agreed with me on the Central Park Five, they admitted, they said, they pled guilty.
Right,
I said, well, if they pled guilty, they badly hurt a person, killed a person ultimately. And if they pled guilty, then they pled, we're not guilty. But this is a person that has to stretch back years, 40, 50 years ago, because there's nothing now. I built one of the greatest economies in the history of the world, and I'm going to build it again. It's going to be bigger, better, and stronger. But they're destroying our economy. They have no idea what a good economy is. Their oil policies, every single policy. And remember this, she is Biden. You know, she's trying to get away from Biden. I don't know the gentleman, she says. She is Biden. The worst inflation we've ever had, a horrible economy because inflation has made it so bad, and she can't get away with that.
Thank you. Your time is up, Lindsay.
I want to respond to that, though. I want to just respond briefly. Clearly, I am not Joe Biden, and I am certainly not Donald Trump. And what I do offer is a new generation of leadership for our country. One who believes in what is possible, one who brings a sense of optimism about what we can do instead of always disparaging the American people. I believe in what we can do to strengthen our small businesses, which is why I have a plan. Let's talk about our plans and let's compare the plans. I have a plan to give startup businesses $50,000 tax deduction, to pursue their ambitions, their innovation, their ideas, their hard work. I have a plan, $6,000 for young families for the first year of your child's life, to help you in that most critical stage of your child's development. I have a plan that is about allowing people
ain't
to be
shit.
able to pursue
That ain't nothing,
whatever
bro.
leading in terms of the American dream by offering
They just want to throw money at you. That's how they get you.
$25,000 down payment.
I talked to my
assistance
family
for
about voting for her. Oh, I'm not going to lose my benefits. That's all they talk about. They throw money at you and think that's going to solve the problem.
as opposed to a conversation that is constantly about belittling and name calling. Let's turn the page.
That's what y'all do to
Yeah,
him
black-
every moment of every
President Trump,
day.
we have to move on. President Trump.
Let's turn to policy,
She has
please.
a plan to
Yeah,
defund
cut her mic
police.
off.
She has a plan to confiscate everybody's gun.
President Trump,
she
we
has
do
a
have to
plan
move on to
not
other
allow
issues.
fracking in Pennsylvania or anywhere else.
Okay. Thank
That's
you, Mr.
what her
President.
plan is until just recently.
I just need
Lindsay,
to
go ahead.
respond
President
because
Trump,
no, the
President
former
Trump.
president has
No,
said
I'm
something
sorry.
twice that I need to
No,
respond to.
I'm sorry. We're
I
gonna
just
we're
need
gonna
to
No,
respond
cut her
to
mic off.
what he has
President
said.
Trump,
Cut her
this is
mic
now
off.
your third time running for president. You have long vowed to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. You have failed to accomplish that. You now say you're going to keep Obamacare, quote, unless we can do something much better. Last month, you said, quote, we're working on it. So tonight, 9 years after you first started running, do you have a plan, and can you tell us what it is?
Obamacare was lousy health care, always was. It's not very good today.
It didn't make no
Said
sense.
that if we come up with something, and we are working on things, we're going to do it and we're going to replace it. But remember this, I inherited Obamacare because Democrats wouldn't change it. They wouldn't vote for it. They were unanimous.
True.
They wouldn't vote to change it. If they would have done that, we would have had a much better plan than Obamacare. But the Democrats came up, they wouldn't vote for it. I had a choice to make when I was president. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, never going to be great, or do I let it rot?
That took some part out of
I
that
had an
sense.
obligation, even though politically it would have been good to just let it rot and let it go away. I decided, and I told my people, the top people, and they're very good people. I have a lot of good people in that administration. We read about the bad ones. We had some real bad ones too, and so do they. They have really bad ones. The difference is they don't get rid of them. But let me just explain. I had a choice to make. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, or do I let it rot? And I saved it. I did the right thing. But it's still never going to be great, and it's too expensive for people. And what we will do is we're looking at different plans. If we can come up with a plan that's going to cost our people, our population, less money and be better health care than Obamacare, then I would absolutely do it. But until then, I'd run it as good as it can be run.
So just a yes or no, you still do not have a plan?
I have concepts of a plan. I'm not president right now. But if we come up with something, I would only change it if we come up with something that's better and less expensive. And there are
He always said
concepts and
that
options
he has not changed that point on that. He always said
and you'll be
that.
hearing about
Yeah.
it in the not too distant future.
Vice President Harris, in 2017, you supported Bernie Sanders' proposal to do away with private insurance and create a government-run healthcare system. 2 years later, you proposed a plan that included a private insurance option. What is your plan today?
Well, first of all, I absolutely support, and over the last 4 years as vice president, private health care options. But what we need
But
to
she
do
wanted
is
to do away
maintain
with
and
it
grow
at
the
first.
Affordable Care Act. But I'll get to that, Lindsay. I just need to respond to a previous point that the former president has made. I've made very clear my position on fracking. And then this business about taking everyone's guns away. Tim Walz and I are both gun owners. We're not taking anybody's guns away. So stop with the continuous lying about this stuff. As it relates to the Affordable Care Act, understand, just look at
Oh,
the
they're gonna
history
eat her
to
up
know where
about that
people
because they
stand.
want her to do it.
When Donald Trump was president, 60 times he tried to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. 60 times. I was a senator at the time when I will never forget the early morning hours when it was up for a vote in the United States Senate. And the late, great John McCain, who you have disparaged as being, you don't like him, you said, at the time because he got caught. He was an American hero. The late, great John McCain, I will never forget that night, walked onto the Senate floor and said,
Come on, get to the point.
no, you don't. No, you don't get rid of the Affordable Care Act. You have no plan. And what the Affordable Care Act has done is eliminate the ability of insurance companies to deny people with pre-existing conditions. I don't have to tell the people watching tonight, you remember what that was like? Remember when an insurance company could deny if a child had asthma, if someone was a breast cancer survivor, if a
That was one of the part of the bill that he wanted to keep. He wanted to keep pre-existing conditions, but the other part that was too expensive, he wanted to eliminate. So you're lying
for the
also.
first time Medicare to negotiate drug prices on behalf of you, the American people. Donald Trump said he was going to allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices. He never did. We did. And now we have capped the cost of insulin at $35 a month. Since I've been vice president, we have capped the cost of prescription medication for seniors at $2,000 a year. And when I am president, we will do that for all people, understanding that the value I bring to this is that access to health care should be a right and not just a privilege of those who can afford it. And the plan has to be to strengthen the Affordable Care Act, not get rid of it,
Vice
pass this
President
prologue
Harris,
in
thank
terms
you.
of where
Pretty
Donald
much what
Trump
he just
stands on
said,
that.
I want
though.
to move to an issue that's important for a
You
lot
made a
of
mistake. Number one, John McCain fought Obamacare for 10 years. But it wasn't only him. It were all of the Democrats that kept it going. And you know what? We can do much better than Obamacare, much less money. But she won't improve private insurance for people, private medical insurance. That's another thing she doesn't want to get.
President
People
Trump-
are paying privately for insurance that have worked hard and made money, and they want to have private. She wants everybody to be on government insurance where you wait 6 months for an operation that
true.
you need immediately.
President Trump,
At
thank
least
you.
it
We
was.
have another issue that we'd like to get to that's important for a number of Americans, in particular younger voters, and that's climate change. President Trump, with regard to the environment, you say that we have to have clean air and clean water. Vice President Harris, you call climate change an existential threat. The question to you both tonight is, what would you do to fight climate change? And Vice President Harris, we'll start with you. 1 minute for you each.
Well, the former president had said that climate change is a hoax. And what we know is that it is very real. You ask anyone who lives in a state who has experienced these extreme weather occurrences, who now is either being denied home insurance or it's being jacked up. You ask anybody who has been the victim of what that means in terms of losing their home, having nowhere to go. We know that we can actually deal with this issue. The young people of America care deeply about this issue. And I am proud that as Vice President over the last 4 years, we have invested $1 trillion in a clean energy economy, while we have also increased domestic gas production to historic levels.
That's an
We have
oxymoron,
created
ain't it?
over 800,000 new manufacturing jobs while I have been
I'm gonna do this, bro.
we
I'm gonna
have
do that.
invested
Wait,
in
hold on,
clean
man.
energy to
You
the
fighting
point that
against
we
your own
are
purpose,
opening
bro.
Exactly.
factories around the world. Donald Trump said he was going to create manufacturing jobs. He lost manufacturing jobs. And I'm also proud to have the endorsement of the United Auto Workers and Sean Fain.
He's
who
ready for
also
that
know
one. She
that part
lying.
of building a clean energy economy includes investing in American-made products, American automobiles. It includes growing what we can do around American manufacturing and opening up auto plants, not closing them like happened under Donald Trump.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
That didn't happen under Donald Trump. Let me just tell you, they lost 10,000 manufacturing jobs this last month. It's going, they're all
Ouch.
leaving. They're building big auto plants in Mexico, in many cases owned by China. They're building these massive plants, and they think they're going to sell their cars into the United States because of these people. What they have given to China is unbelievable. But we're not going to let that. We'll put tariffs on those cars so they can't come into our country, because they will kill the United Auto Workers and any auto worker, whether it's in Detroit
Yeah,
or
but she want
South
to tax the
Carolina
hell
or
out of
any
all
other
the
place.
corporations
What
and
they've
push them
done
to
to
move
business
overseas and shit.
manufacturing in
Of
this
course.
country
Just like
is
in California, all the
horrible.
businesses
We
leaving
have
California.
nothing because they
Exactly.
refuse.
Elon Musk just moved his damn headquarters from over there. That's why they build it up in Texas right now.
Between him and
Big
his
ass
son, they get
mega
all this money
factory.
from Ukraine. They get all this money from all of these different countries, and then you wonder, why is he so loyal to this one, that one, Ukraine, China? Why is he? Why did he get $3.5 million from the mayor of Moscow's wife? Why did she pay him $3.5 million? This is a crooked administration, and they're selling our country down the tubes.
President Trump, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with closing statements from both of our candidates. An historic night, this ABC News presidential debate from Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
Crazy.
Crazy.
There's nothing extraordinary about that. It's the same talking points.
After this.
You know,
This
race,
PBS News presentation
women's
is brought to you
body.
by
There's nothing that. Hey, why we not past the budget yet, bro? Why we have not passed the budget yet, bro? You're the VP right now. Yo, we need to pass the budget. The American people are suffering. We need to pass the budget, bro. We haven't done that yet, bro. And how I know, because it affects me.
Mm.
So what the hell they talking about, bro? This guy can show up to DC and say, I need some more money for this war. And it's like, there you go.
Yep.
That's not a budget. Come on, man. Stop the nonsense, bro.
Yeah, they talked
Don't.
about.
I'm not. Good.
If you notice, they talked about all the stuff that they tried to get Trump on. You know what I'm saying? They only asked her like, "Oh, why you changed your policies?" And she didn't even answer that. But everything else was like, "Okay, Trump, you said this, you said that," and she kind of responded to it and shit like that. But they ain't really hit none of the most pressing issues. I wish they would have. This ain't one of the most pressing issues, but I wish they would have asked something about like transgenderism, for example, in women's sports, or like, you know.
Oh yeah.
So I wish they would have gave Trump the opportunity to ask her, because she's so hung up on like women this and women that. I wish they would have gave him the opportunity to ask her what she thinks a woman is. You know what I'm saying?
Oh man,
she would have studied through that so hard. God, I wish she could have.
That's why you can't do it on these liberal networks. You need a network that's going to ask both parties hard questions, tough questions. And that's why she don't want to do it on Fox News or these other, like The Hill or something like that, because we already know they'll give them softbox questions. Come on, man. We're not dumb.
That's why she
It'd be
refused
great
to do it on the other networks, yeah.
I don't mind having a woman president, but bro, you're not gonna speak to me like you're my mother, bro, because you make no sense at all what you're talking about. Oh, we need to unite, bro. We're more divided now than ever before. Even in Germany, bro, people don't want to talk to each other no more. So it's not just America; it's across the board, because all this fear, all these immigrants. You got the AFD. They're like what 22, 23% now in Parliament. Like, come on, man, are you kidding me? People are tired, bro. They're not even looking at the big picture. Bro, you've been VP. You got a president that you lied saying that dude was good to go. All of a sudden, he ain't good to go, and you stepped in
Exactly.
just like that. There's
Exactly.
no debates. There's no challenge. They just say, hey, we just going to make you our nominee, and we're going to give you like 80 billion dollars to just start running. It's like a head start.
Exactly. Yeah, they want to talk about democracy so much, but they completely subverted the democracy. They knew the whole time, like you just said, he been old and decrepit, and he done had a brain condition since he had an aneurysm and shit like that. He been
Facts.
incompetent pretty much the whole presidency. You know what I'm saying? And he could hide back then because of Corona and shit. And they've been hiding her the same way they was hiding him. She did one softball interview before this, and they kept Biden in there, just like you just said, until it was too late to have a primary. And they just, I think they planned that shit the whole time. You know what I'm saying? To just insert her and tell everybody, nobody challenge her. She the presidential nominee now. You know what I'm saying? All the delegates, y'all fall in line and give her all y'all votes and stuff. We gonna hire her from the people. She ain't gotta answer no questions, cause we gonna fall back on her being a black woman, and that's all we need. You know what I'm saying?
That's all we need, bro. Nah.
And Trump is a felon. Trump is this. He's a. I believe this. I believe that whole assassination. I think they got something to do with that whole assassination. I think Trump's supposed to be dead right now. If it was up to them. You know what I'm saying? She's supposed to have an even easier path to the presidency. You know what I'm saying?
Bro. It's just weird how all that went down. Where how you able to take a shot at the president with clear open view when you have counter snipers, you have
On
police
top
in the
of the
same
counter
building.
sniper building. It don't make no sense, but they back.
I think you've heard tonight
The director talking about, the Slowfoot building. Get out of here, man.
one that is focused
The
on the
Slowfoot
future
building, the
and the
Kennedy
other that is focused on the past and an attempt to take us backward. But we're not going back. And I do believe that the American people know we all have so much more in common than what separates us. And we can chart a new way forward. And a vision of that includes having a plan, understanding the aspirations, the dreams, the hopes, the ambition of the American people, which is why I intend to create an opportunity economy, investing in small businesses, in new families, in what we can do around protecting seniors, what we can do that is about giving hardworking folks a break and bringing down the cost of living. I believe in what we can do together that is about sustaining America's standing in the world and ensuring that we have the respect that we so rightly deserve, including respecting our military and ensuring we have the most lethal fighting force in the world. I will be a president that will protect our fundamental rights and freedoms, including the right of a woman to make decisions about her own body and not have her government tell her what to do. I'll tell you, I started my career as a prosecutor. I was a DA, I was an attorney general, a United States senator, and now vice president. I've only had one client, the people. And I'll tell you, as a prosecutor, I never asked a victim or a witness, are you a Republican or a Democrat? The only thing I ever asked them, are you okay?
Oh, Lord.
And that's the kind of president we need right now. Someone who cares about you and is not putting themselves first. I intend to be a president for all Americans and focus on what we can do over the next 10 and 20 years to build back up our country by investing right now in you, the American people.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump?
So she just started by saying she's going to do this, she's going to do that, she's going to do all these wonderful things. Why hasn't she done it She's been there for 3.5 years. They've had 3.5 years to fix the border. They've had 3.5 years to create jobs and all the things we talked about. Why hasn't she done it? She should leave right now, go down to that beautiful White House, go to the Capitol, get everyone together and do the things you want to do, but you haven't done it, and you won't do it because you believe in things that the American people don't believe in. You believe in things like we're not going to frack. We're not going to take fossil fuel. We're not going to do things that are going to make this country strong, whether you like it or not. Germany tried that, and within 1 year, they were back to building normal energy plants. We're not ready for it. We can't sacrifice our country for the sake of bad vision.
We live in
But I
Germany,
just asked
people. We
one
know.
simple question.
We know for a fact.
Didn't she do it? We're a failing
Them solar
nation.
panels ain't working. They had to turn back on some nuclear plants. It wasn't
They're
enough.
laughed at all over the world. All over the world, they're laughed. I know the leaders very well. They're coming to see me. They call me. We're laughed at all over the world. They don't understand what happened to us as a nation. We're not a leader. We don't have any idea what's going on. We have wars going on in the Middle East. We have wars going on with Russia and Ukraine. We're going to end up in a third world war, and it'll be a war like no other because of nuclear weapons, the power of weaponry. I rebuilt our entire military. She gave a lot of it away to the Taliban. She gave it to Afghanistan. What these people have done to our country, and maybe toughest of all, is allowing millions of people to come into our country. Many of them are criminals, and they're destroying our country. The worst president, the worst vice president in the history of our country.
President Trump, thank you. And that is our ABC News presidential debate from here in Philadelphia at the National Constitution Center. I'm Lindsay Davis.
And I'm David Moore. Thank you for watching here in the U.S. and all over the world, and from all of us here at ABC News. Good night.
No bias. Who you think actually won that?
No
Regardless.
bias. Who won?
I mean, if you had to vote right now.
I mean, if I had
On what?
if I had to vote right now, obviously I'd vote for Trump. It's hard for me to give an unbiased opinion, but off the things that were said in the debate, knowing Kamala Harris flip-flopped on a lot of the things that she once stood for, seeing video evidence, seeing her saying verbatim out of her mouth that she believes the opposite of a lot of the stuff she said, and knowing that Trump has stood like steadfast on everything he believes in and that he's been trying to push the whole time, even before he ever ran for president. You know what I'm saying? You gotta go with Trump, man, because the bottom line, she been in office for the last 3.5 years, and she ain't done none of that stuff she talking about. You know what I'm saying? I know she was just the vice president, but she was the first advisor to the guy who supposedly was the president. You know what I'm saying? And she been lying about him too. You know, I think she's a socialist. I think she gonna lead the country down the path to communism. You know, her and Michelle Obama and Barack Obama. You know, you got to read through the lines on some of them. Even with when Michelle Obama was at the DNC and she was like saying stuff like, it is a such thing. I don't know what she said, but verbatim, she was like, you can't have too much money. You know, my parents didn't trust people with too much money. And, you know, share the wealth. And these are socialist like principles. And the way she want to put caps on stuff and like control prices of stuff, and all her stances are just too radically liberal. And I can't get with that. And I don't like how we was talking about how they just placed her in there like that. You know what I'm saying? That's not them. That's not the people didn't choose her. It's not democracy.
Right. We didn't select her.
We didn't select her. And Trump been the Republican nominee since 2016.
Yep. And he's still been going on because when she first came out there, she was at the bottom of the list for being president of the United States. All of a sudden, she's the top nominee of all those people that's still alive and still able to run and be her at the polls. That is crazy, bro.
She
You're
didn't
not
get
gonna
one
mess
delegate. She
with
didn't win
me.
one vote last time.
Exactly. I'm like, you're not gonna use emotional conversation that, oh, we need to be friends and neighbors uh, in order for us to build this nation back. Bull crap. You're not gonna put money in my lap and say, hey, here you go. This is how you'll make your life better. No, it's all baked. If you go back to the States, I look around, they give you all this benefit, but why there's nothing changing? They got pharmaceutical, CVS, and all these other companies on every third block. Why you need so much pharmacies on every third block? What you need that for in a poor neighborhood? Everybody's on drugs, walking around like zombies. New York City's going to trap. You got people just walking in stores with guns, robbing people, punching people in the face and stuff. What you talking about, man? I want to
Yeah,
see results. Stop talking to my emotions. Oh, we need to care about people. Trust me, I bet you go to Venezuela, they gonna treat us the same.
exactly.
They can say you're American. Who do you think? Who the hell you think you are? You're not gonna get those benefits. Hey, I'm here. I'm running for America. I need help. I don't want to be American no more. They're gonna get you like you crazies again. Like, get the hell out of here, man.
Yeah, man. I'm oh, somebody say we echoing. But I'm interested to see how people are going to receive the debate. I'm sure it's going to be a lot of memes. We're going to wake up to a lot of memes tomorrow, and a lot of people saying, a lot of Democrats saying Kamala won and she was strong, and a lot of Republicans saying the opposite. So let's see.
Yeah, she was strong in her demeanor. That's all I saw. She was trying to look tough, staring him down. And he said, "Look, I'm not gonna play that stare down game because I know what you're trying to do. Because you're gonna say that, look at Trump staring me down, trying to intimidate. We ain't done, bro.
Yeah, I mean, let's just see. If you want, we can reconvene like tomorrow evening or something like that. But it's almost 5 over here, people. We in Germany, like we said. But yeah, I appreciate you joining me to watch it though, bro.
Too easy, man. Anytime, bro. I gotta go to the gym in about an hour.
Oh shit, yeah, I gotta take the kids to school in a little bit too. So I'm about to pass out.
All right, brother. It was a pleasure.
All right, same.
Stay up, man.
You too, bro. Peace.
Later.